Hey, everybody. Welcome to Battleground. Today on the show, we've got Clay Travis. Now, Clay Travis is a Fox News contributor. He's also the founder of Outkick, which is a brand new sports media company that challenges the status quo. Clay Travis is a mover and a shaker. He's one of the most prominent sports commentators today. You probably see him on Fox News all the time. Unfortunately, at the beginning of this episode, we had some audio and video issues, just some technical issues. And so rather than subject you all to those horrible technical issues, we're just going to jump right into the episode, probably about 3 or 4 minutes in. As always, thank you so much for watching the show. God bless you all. Never retreat, never surrender. Your question was, looking forward to 2024, what do Republicans have to do to change the game? And what I found so fascinating, Clay, was reading up a little bit about your story prior to you coming on the show. What I found so interesting was that you weren't a traditional Republican.
Not at all.
In fact, like for a long time, you were voting Democrat, and I think I read now on Wikipedia, so take it with a grain of salt. But like you didn't vote Republican until 2020, and what I wanted to ask you is that, like, what was the final straw that made you shift perspectives and back Republican candidates? I'm not saying you're backing all Republican candidates, but it seems like I'll tell you what I saw, Clay, when I was running for Congress and shit hit the fan with COVID. And you even had Republican governors like locking things down and closing schools and businesses and allowing, Antifa and Black Lives Matter to protest, but not allowing people to go to church, but allowing strip clubs to stay open. The whole thing as a candidate, where I had people coming to me every single day saying, Sean, I can't afford to put food on the table for my family. Sean, my Paycheck Protection Program loan hasn't come through. Sean, what do I do about paying the rent on my... So it was just like, I'm sad to say, like I first noticed you, Clay, was speaking out about COVID. Yeah. And I have to say, you were one of the few voices of reason out there.
Yeah, so I would say there were two big things that happened for me that, first of all, I don't think I've changed. I think I was kind of a middle-of-the-road guy for my entire life. And then Democrats went insane. And so I was someone who was kind of middle of the road. And then Democrats went so far left that I really haven't moved at all, right? Like, I'm a First Amendment guy. I'm a marketplace of ideas guy. I'm a logic guy. And so there were two things in particular. One, the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, to me, were indefensible in the way that Democrats behaved as a part of that investigation and as a part of that entire process. But then to your point, COVID. Remember, I'm a sports talk radio guy. So I'm just sitting down, every day. Sports shut down. And so for March, April, May, June of 2020, there's no sports going on. And I'm looking at all the data and saying, there's no way to justify shutting down sports. There's no way to justify shutting down schools. And I was like the only guy out there saying it. And so that's where it all kind of took off for me. And frankly, I can't believe that Democrats did what they did with COVID. And that is what led me. Look, it was a slow process, right? Because I've been reacting angrily to the concept of identity politics and cancel culture for years, but through the prism of sports, right? Like, I don't think because some 15-year-old kid quoted rap lyrics on Twitter, now he's famous because he's 24 and he's an athlete or whatever, that we should be trying to cancel him, right? I don't think whatever your opinion is in the world, like, I don't think the Kaepernick thing kind of accelerated it in a big way for me too, because what I've always loved about sports is black, white, Asian, Hispanic, gay, straight, like Democrat, Republican. If you're sitting in a stadium or an arena and your team wins, you don't think about any of the identity of the person around you other than you're of a similar tribe, right? Like, you're high-fiving. I've loved sports because whether you're the janitor or the neurosurgeon, you can sit down in a hospital cafeteria and have a one-on-one conversation where you're both on equal footing. And they took that away. and I saw the way that sports was becoming politics by any other name, and I rejected and repudiated it. My last book was called Republicans Buy Sneakers Too, which is a Michael Jordan quote about why he didn't get involved in politics. And so I saw sports becoming incredibly political. And for a long time, my argument was like, man, I just think this is bad business because you should be trying to apply to and appeal to everyone. And then it slowly turned into, well, if you have conservative opinions, and conservative was defined very broadly, and I saw this running Outkick, there was this knife fight for the wokest 25%. I mean, you're seeing it play out right now, literally on this Good Friday as we talk. There is an argument that Title IX should be expanded, which the Biden administration has bought into, to include men who identify as women. And that sports should have to include men. Well, men are bigger, stronger, and faster than women, Sean. They're going to not win every sport if we allow this to occur, as we just saw with Leah Thomas. And so I find that I got to speak out. And it wasn't just sports opinions anymore.
Well, I mean, God, I totally agree with everything you're saying. And like, let me tell you, like, I'm a big sports guy too. I played competitive sports my entire life.
Yeah.
I wrestled, played baseball, played ice hockey, and then joined the Army and went to fight in a platoon in Afghanistan, as you know. But I mean, ESPN was, I mean, man, as a kid growing up, and I was born in 1981, but
I'm 79, so we're around the same age. Yep.
ESPN was on every day in my house. I mean, that's just what we did. And even some of the anchors, right? Like, they were iconic.
Yep.
Like, we laughed and joked around about them at school. They were the topic of all of our conversations. And then slowly the network changed.
Yep. And
to now, it seems like sports, and I think in a bad way now, are so intertwined with politics. Sports almost can't extricate itself, because I love sports for all the same reasons that you do.
Yep.
And here's the thing, though, Clay. I've been thinking about this for like about the past week, because it seemed like it started, Kaepernick takes a knee for the anthem. Republicans, conservatives, people that are pro-America are like, what? That's crazy. And then Trump weighs in and shit just completely hits the fan. But as I thought about that more, that like, okay, so that is undoubtedly true, Clay. But what about like Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay becoming Muhammad Ali, converting to Islam, protesting the Vietnam War? Like, he was very political back then, but something was different, and I haven't been able to put my finger on it.
Yeah, well, it's such a good point. I mean, I think we're seeing an echo in many ways of the 60s, right? The difference, I would argue, is and I wrote, I mean, really, I would encourage, people love this conversation. I spent so much time diving into it, Ali in particular, and analyzing the world as it existed. So let me just tell you an example for Kaepernick. Kaepernick took a knee to protest police violence against black people, right? He didn't take a knee to protest police violence. Now, if he had taken a knee to protest police violence, I still think it would have been a errant move. But Muhammad Ali protested the Vietnam War on behalf of everybody, right? There is a difference between an individual boxer, right, who stands for himself entirely, and a player in uniform at work protesting. And so, I would always take it outside of the moment of Kaepernick, and I would say, okay, if you walked into McDonald's and you walked up and you said, hey, I want a Big Mac, and the McDonald's clerk said, I believe meat is murder, it wouldn't be crazy for McDonald's to fire that person, right? Like, in fact, you would say they need to do it.
Yes.
If you went in to Walmart,
of course.
If you went into Walmart and you were checking out, and on the way as checking out, the clerk said, hey, just so you know, abortion is murder. You would be like, hey, I just kind of want to buy my Walmart gear. I don't need to have abortion politics from every Walmart clerk who walks by. And that's understandable. Now, if you want to drive into Walmart in your car and you've got bumper stickers on it, or if you want to pull into McDonald's and you've got bumper stickers on your car, you have the right outside of work, outside of uniform, to advocate for anything that you want to. And so what would really put people's kind of brains in a blender is, I would say, okay, what if instead of protesting police murders, taking a knee during the national anthem, what do you think people would have said if Colin Kaepernick had come out and said, hey, I'm going to take a knee during the national anthem because I think the Supreme Court incorrectly decided that marriage should be legal for gay people? The same people who are screaming, oh, what a hero Kaepernick is, would be screaming, this guy's got to be fired. He can't represent the San Francisco 49ers anymore. And really what I'm getting at is it's bad business for any political opinion of any stripe or persuasion to be brought to work in uniform at work, right? And so that to me is important. And it's also important to recognize people were not defending Colin Kaepernick's free speech rights because, by the way, the government wasn't doing anything to take away his free speech rights.
Right.
They were specifically defending speech that they agreed with. And I'll also say Colin Kaepernick also aired, he's just not good enough to be able to do that, right? If Aaron Rodgers...
Correct. I totally agree.
If Aaron Rodgers had taken a knee and said, hey, I think we're unfairly treating ISIS during the national anthem, even though that, I wouldn't have agreed with that.
They would put up with it.
People would have said, yeah, but he's the top 5 quarterback in the league. And if you doubt that, Deshaun Watson just got the biggest contract in the history of football, and he's accused of sexually assaulting 30 different women. Now, they didn't bring criminal charges, but that's the sign. I always like to say, sports, so long as your talent exceeds your problems, you'll always be employed. Colin Kaepernick's problem was he wasn't that good, and his talent did not exceed the controversy that he created. There are a lot of guys out there that their talent exceeds them. I mean, if Antonio Brown's been charged with basically everything under the sun, and until he literally walked off the field in the middle of a game
with the shirt
and threw up the peace sign on his way out, there were still teams that were willing
clamoring
to give him an opportunity to play for them.
It's such a great point. And I mean, you talk about like the whole like politics being intertwined with sports and what happened to ESPN. If it just bothers me because I feel like they're just pushing this political bullshit on their audience that doesn't want it, that just wants to be able to watch a damn game without having that bullshit forced down their throats. And frankly, like if you're an anchor, and I would probably say 99% of the anchors at ESPN would parrot this stuff. But if you're an anchor that believes that men should be competing in women's sports, then I don't really give a shit about any of your sports opinions.
Yeah,
you
shouldn't be in sports, right? Because
I completely agree.
The meritocracy, the best way
we control for things to make the competition fair.
Yeah,
I mean, this is why we have women's sports leagues, right? Yeah. I mean, this is why we have scholarships for women, which is why it's like the Biden administration trying to change the way that Title IX, right? Title IX is implemented is sickening to me. Because
if you make it age instead of gender, here's an easy pitch, Sean. I have coached a lot of Little League and basketball. If I showed up at my 12-year-old's baseball games this week and I said, I've got this great player, he's going to be incredible, and I brought a 16-year-old to play on the 12U team,
people would freak out.
He would dominate, right? But every single parent would immediately say, this isn't allowed, right? Remember Little League World Series? Kid out of New York was 14 years old, the pitcher, and he was dominating 12U, and there was a huge uproar and outrage over that. People totally understood it, right? They understood how ridiculous that was. Well, I mean, allowing Leah Thomas, who's 6'3" or whatever he is, 220 pounds, huge arms, big hands, feet, like to compete against Riley Gaines is crazy. And the other wild thing here is the girls. I feel bad for them because a lot of them are not going to make a lot of money in women's sports. And so many of them are terrified to speak out because they're worried about getting labeled transphobic. Suddenly they can't get in grad school. They can't get a job. Well, they're kind of handcuffed. And I give credit to Riley Gaines for being willing to speak out on this.
I mean, Clay, I personally think she's a hero. I mean, she's a pioneer, and I think history will look back on her kindly.
Yes.
And I would say, like, I've got 5 kids. I've got a blended family. I've got 3 daughters now, and I watch them work their asses off every day. I watch them out there practicing soccer, volleyball, cheer, whatever. And they're going to go through all of junior high and all of high school, waking up early, when their friends are going out to hang out, watch a movie or whatever, they're going to be dedicating themselves to either practice or games.
Yep.
They're going to work their asses off all through high school, and only to have some man or some teenage boy take what college scholarship might be meant for them. To me, it just, I don't understand. You see people all the time on Twitter, Clay, saying, well, if women just refused to compete, this problem would solve. But I'm like thinking to myself, like, well, wait, you're asking a lot of high school and college young women to take stands. Like, you saw what happened to Riley Gaines yesterday, assaulted by a trans mob, right? And you're asking a lot of young girls to take that stance who've dedicated their life to whatever sport that they're in, to take that stance, knowing that there are going to be severe repercussions for it, perhaps down the line, definitely in the moment. So I think, like, the solution is, like, we also have to use our platforms as adults, both men and women, and speak out on this. J.K. Rowling has done it. Megyn Kelly has done it. Riley Gaines has done it. But we need more. I think we need men to speak out it as well.
Yeah, look, I mean, at some point, we talked about this today on Clay and Buck, but this is a story I've been talking about for years. But at some point, inclusion moves into exclusion. And let me explain what I mean by that. When you are saying, I am a man, and I have now decided to identify as a woman, in order to compete as women's athletes, you're actually knocking true women out of being able to compete. You are excluding women. And I'm paraphrasing here, but one of the toughest quotes, Outkick wrote about this in the Leah Thomas context. Several University of Pennsylvania women swimmers reached out. They wouldn't even allow their names to be used. They were terrified of what might happen to them. But one of the girls said she hopes that when she grows up and gets married and has kids, that she has boys, because if she has girls, she's worried that the trans community will have effectively canceled women's athletics. I mean, think about how awful that is for a women's swimmer in college, an elite level swimmer, right? In order to be able to perform in college at that level, to have spent her entire life, as you said, getting up at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., not only her, her parents, her grandparents, her family and friends, to get her to practice, to put her full commitment and effort behind it, and you lose because a dude decides that he wants to identify as a woman. It's just fundamentally wrong.
I mean, how did we get here, Clay? I mean, you're looking at, like, the trans mafia feels like exactly that. I mean, you have trans kids shooting up schools, killing our children. You have men dressed up like women in dresses, assaulting women. People say nothing. We've accepted a culture in some ways, not everybody, but it seems like we've accepted, like, people are pushing sex changes on our kids, oftentimes without parental consent. In fact, most of the left, if they had a blank check to do what they want, they wouldn't inform parents about that stuff at all. That's horrifying. And how did we get here? Well, if you would have told me 10 years ago that we'd be having these conversations and advocating for sex changes for kids that are 10 years old, and saying that newborn babies, oh, my newborn has they, them pronouns, like, I know it. The baby knows this. That's completely insane. And it just seems like things have gone completely off the rails.
My theory is that there are a lot of people like me who are relatively live and let live for adults, right? You want to sleep whoever you with, as long as it's consensual adults. I don't really care what you do in your private life.
Of course.
And I think the same thing was true with trans people. It was like, okay, you want to be an adult and you want to identify as a woman or a man or whatever. I don't have any problem with it. The problem is the left wing in this country is not content with that. They need you to acknowledge fundamental untruths. There's a difference between, hey, I'm a guy, I want to identify as a girl. Okay, you go do that. I don't care. You can live that life. But as soon as you say, you have to acknowledge that I am a woman, and that I am able to compete against women's athletics. And Sean, this is the question I've also been asking people of late. I think it's a flaw of women. And let me explain what I mean by this. I think women are more tolerant and more inclusive in general and more welcoming and more emotional than men are. And just think about this. Can you even name a famous trans person who is female and has decided to identify as male? Not
no.
Like you can point to like Ellen/Elliot Page, whatever. That's somebody who was famous as a girl and might still be somewhat famous as a guy. But my point on that is, as we've seen Nike and Bud Light.
What about Bruce Jenner?
But Bruce Jenner went from female to male. There's tons of from male to female, right? There's tons of famous men who identify as women. There's hardly anybody who is famous who is female and decides to identify as a man, right? And my argument for why that would be the case is, one, women can't make who identify as men. They can't make sports teams, right? So they're not big, strong, or fast enough to make any team. So there's no controversy there, right? Like if you are a 14-year-old girl and you want to identify as a 14-year-old boy, you have virtually a 0% chance of making any male sports team. Also, men, I think, just kind of feel sorry for women who want to identify as men, and we're not using them as paragons of masculinity, right? Like we're not holding them up. Conversely, use this ridiculous Nike ad. Nike put a dude who is identifying as a woman in a sports bra. He has no boobs. In like women's leggings, he literally has a dick and balls, right? Like,
it's crazy. It's absolutely batshit crazy. Yeah.
Try to sell women's athletic apparel, and so I think women are so welcoming that they have gotten played here because men, by and large, the trans community doesn't really impact us because we just kind of roll our eyes and we say, do whatever you want. Women have tried to really buy into this idea of, oh, you're a woman too, which is why I think it's actually a modern day version, to your point earlier on Riley Gaines. I think it's a modern day version of blackface, right? Because these men are pretending to be exaggerated versions of women, not actually reflecting most of the women that all of us know, and making money off of, in many ways, this woman face mockery. And women have allowed it to happen. And I think it's because they've taken advantage, the trans community has, of the overwhelming welcomingness and tolerance of women. They're actually now being mocked by men. It's crazy. Think about this. The ultimate white male privilege isn't anything that white guys like you and I do. It's deciding that you're actually a chick and then getting named Woman of the Year. That's pretty crazy.
It's like
you're afraid of that. First year ever, you're Woman of the Year.
I know.
I mean, I'm a dude. If some chick became a dude for a year and immediately got named Man of the Year, I'd be like, man, that's kind of crazy.
It feels to me like the world is upside down. And so I think part of what we're talking about and your willingness to talk about these cultural issues, and sports and culture are related. There's no two ways about it. I mean, sports have gotten this country through some really tough times. I mean, and it's always been something that we've been able to unify around. I mean, sadly today it seems a little bit more divisive, but I still think people by and large see sports as something that's unifying, as you said. So Outkick.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously ESPN, I think, is just a total dumpster fire. I think that they're hemorrhaging viewers. I can't watch it anymore. It's just unwatchable to me. Like, and if you're watching, by the way, watching or listening, like, stop watching ESPN, like, subscribe to Outkick, go to their websites. Like, it really is a great site. Like, you're the founder of Outkick. And I think the tendency is when people see you on TV and they see Outkick scrolling behind you, I think the tendency is like, oh, that's the Outkick guy. He just sold that to Fox News now. And when I was reading about you, you've been doing this for a long time. I mean, you registered the domain name Outkick the Coverage like over 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So talk to me, if you would, about the grind, Clay, because Outkick is becoming, I mean, it's growing like gangbusters just from a business standpoint. I mean, it's growing like crazy. I mean, I think people are on board with your mission and your message, and you're developing great content, You had to have faced some resistance along the way, though.
All the time, right? I mean, so I founded Outkick in 2011. At the time, I was working at a website called fanhouse.com. And some people may remember that. It was the sports arm of basically MSN.com, but kind of and we got shut down. So I and everybody else got laid off in 2011. And so what I had seen already, I'd worked at Deadspin before it was totally crazy, at CBSSports.com.
Before they were writing hit pieces on you.
Yeah, right. But I felt like I knew the online sports media business. But more important than that, I was doing local sports talk radio at the time. I felt like I understood the advertising business. And my thought process was, I don't want anybody else to be able to control whether I can take care of my family anymore. So like a lot of people probably listening to us right now, I started a small business because I wanted to control what I was able to make a living doing. And I grinded, I'd sell every ad. I would write every article by and large, edit every article. I would do it all. I mean, I worked all the time. And we just slowly started to grow. And again, 2011, sports hadn't gone crazy, right? I love college football. We were primarily focused on fun, zany, irreverent stories that, like Johnny Manziel dressing, remember, going out for Halloween as Scooby-Doo and a smoking hot girl right? Like that was the kind of story that we would put up, just to entertain people during the course of the day. And as I got older and the country got crazier, I found that we were talking more and more about these cultural related issues. And I just kept looking around like, man, is this real? Right? Like, and I saw so much artificiality and dishonesty. What I have found is, whether you agree or disagree with me, I say exactly what I think. There's no like tiptoeing up to my opinion. And I think that had become so rare in sports that there was a desperate desire for it. And I always say, Outkick is founded on 4 principles: smart, original, funny, and authentic. If you can do all 4, it's a home run. But everything has to have at least one of those 4. And so that was kind of our goal, and we just continued to grow. I was doing radio at the time. I moved into doing television. And as all of these began to feed together, sports gambling became legal. I love to gamble on sports. I imagine a lot of people out there listening to us do. And I always think 95% in my experience of what guys talk about, right? We have a lot of women readers, a lot of women listeners, but initially Outkick's a guy site. Girls, sports, and money. Maybe a little bit of alcohol if you want to toss in, but like most guy conversations, girls, sports, how to make money, like all these different things, right? That's kind of what we did. And it just continued to grow. And what I would say is the woke community and this cancel culture and identity politics infected sports more and more. What I saw happening was there was a knife fight to be the wokest sports company, right? Like everybody's competing over like fake women athletes enough, right?
Yeah.
Sitting over here on the side, like this is crazy. So what I found was increasingly we're serving 75 or 80% of the American sports fan, and the ESPNs of the world were fighting over who could be the wokest for the other 20%. And so that's why our audience has skyrocketed. March was we just finished March, second best month of all time. I think we were up, quadrupled our audience over last March. I have a lot of fun with the Buck Sexton show with Buck and me. That show is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, in all of radio anywhere in the country. And so what I feel fortunate about is if you combine Outkick, Fox News, and the radio show that I have an opportunity to influence, I like to think, public thought in a big way just by sharing exactly what I think. And my wife always says the reason I don't need therapy so far is because I say 3 hours or more every day of exactly. I have no weight on my shoulders, right? Like,
yeah,
I've done everything that I can, and then people can agree or disagree with it. But, I'm going to go play with my kids, shoot basketball, throw football in the backyard, and not really have a lot of weight. I've got 3 boys, a lot of weight on my shoulders because I feel like I was able to say exactly what I thought, which is why the number one thing that people say to me, Sean, when they come up is, I've never would have ever thought that a guy who talks about sports and then kind of moves into pop culture and politics, people would ever say thank you. But the reason they're saying it is because they don't feel like they can do it, right? They're worried about paying their mortgage. They're worried about taking care of their family. And the last thing they want to do is alienate some woke company and get kicked to the curb, and they can't take care of their family. So it's a privilege to be able to speak for so many who don't feel like they can speak themselves.
I mean, do you ever think that you went from being the boobs and First Amendment guy on CNN to this? I mean, was there a moment like after that where you ever worried like, okay, I'm banned for life from CNN and I'm banned from ESPN? Do you ever think yourself that like maybe you were on the wrong track? I mean, it doesn't sound like you're that kind of a guy, but I gotta ask.
Well, I think it depends on what you mean by, wrong track. I didn't think.
Well, I mean, there are hills and valleys, right? Like when you're in those lows.
I worried about would I be able to take care of my family for much of my career, right? I mean, I think I've written about this, but I remember back in like 2011 going to a minor league baseball game, AAA, and feeling like I was a AAA player, but I didn't know if I would ever get my chance to play in the major leagues. And so I think there's a lot of athletes who understand that, where you can be really, really good, but something goes a little bit wrong. You tweak a knee. The guy who's in front of you ends up being an all-star and plays for 15 years, and suddenly you're a little bit expendable. But you've risen to that level where you can see you're so close to kind of popping through, right? The difference between making $50,000 a year as a AAA minor leaguer and making $50 million a year and being a major league all-star, it sounds substantial. For those athletes who understand, it's oftentimes an infinitesimally small difference. And so I felt like that. I mean, look, I was 30, I'm 43 now. I just turned 44 yesterday. But when I was 33, 34, 35, I'm making $45,000, $50,000 a year. I got kids that I'm taking care of. And I definitely thought, hey, am I going to be able to provide for my family like I want to be able to provide for my family? So I wasn't necessarily worried about how the external world was responding to me. I was more worried, like a lot of dads and moms are, about just being able to give my kids the best possible opportunities in their life. So I sat back and I thought, maybe I'm going to have to go back to practicing law full time. Maybe, this media business is not going to pan out like I wanted it to. But fortunately, I had people who were willing to stand behind me. And it turns out that I'm pretty good at writing radio and TV. And those all kind of started to feed together. And again, I just come back to, I talk to the vast majority. Most people agree with me, right? I'm always labeled controversial, but what's always crazy to me, Sean, is like, and to your point, I'll sit here and I'll be like, how is it controversial to think that women shouldn't be competing against dudes, right? Like if you actually break down what I say, it's very rational, it's very logical, and it's not even remotely controversial.
I mean, what's funny, Clay? I don't remember where I was. I think I had just done a speaking engagement, or I was sitting in an airport coming home or something, like when I was CNN was on in the airport, or I was watching it in a bar or something, like about to catch a flight. And I saw you say that live, and I almost spit out my drink. I thought it, and part of it was just like, I thought it was hysterical, but also watching her Brooke Baldwin's face. And I just thought to myself, like, even that, like in a supposed controversial moment for you, I still think you probably had millions of people out there laughing at the authenticity.
Was apologize, right? And I think what I would encourage anybody out there in media to do is, I'm not saying don't ever apologize, because there may, knock on wood, right? There may be a time when I'm live on the air for 3 hours every day, as I am, that I misspeak and I say something that I did not intend to say, came out wrong. Look, I'm married. Trust me, I apologize all the time, even when I don't think I've done anything. But I've never had to publicly apologize because, what I find is the people who demand that you apologize are not interested in actually having you apologize. They want to weaken and destroy you. And my audience does not want me to apologize because, as I said earlier, I'm saying the things that they wish they could say. But in that scenario, look, I've been saying, first of all, that's a CNN error for booking me in the first place, if that's unacceptable to say. I've said on my radio show for years and years, I've written it, right? Because, and the reason like behind it is, one, it's witty, but if you say, which I am, I'm a First Amendment absolutist, people like don't really understand that, right? It's like kind of hard to get a handle on. So I started saying, hey, the only two things that have never let me down are the First Amendment and boobs. I 100% support both. And they understood it. And the funny thing about that, Sean, is I don't know how soon after that it happened, but Hugh Hefner died. And CNN did like 2 or 3 days in a row about what a brave guy Hugh Hefner was. It's like, wait a minute. If there's ever been more of a First Amendment and boobs guy, it's Hugh Hefner, right? And frankly, by the way, a lot of women responded very favorably to that too, because they're like, come on, like, are you going to pretend that you're surprised that men like cleavage? Like, I mean, like this is that we live in such a fundamentally artificial society that people feel compelled to apologize for things that mostly everybody agrees are real and recognizable. And I think in that particular segment, now I knew it was going to be controversial, and you can imagine, I was like Friday afternoon, I told my wife, hey, I've just got to do this last CNN interview. Then we're going to take the kids out for pizza. And my wife was watching the interview downstairs. And to your point, her first thing that she texted me was, do I need to put the house on the market? And they tried. I mean, she's got a good sense of humor, but they tried to cancel me, right? ESPN tried to get me canceled over that. They tried to persuade my radio station to cease to allow me to do my morning sports talk radio show. Now, I didn't really panic because I knew I owned Outkick. And that's what I would say. If you own the means of your distribution, and I also fought back and, like refused to bow down. But there have been lots of times in my career, certainly, where people have wanted to cancel me. And I think having your own means of distribution, owning your content, is what provides that protection from you being able to be canceled.
God, it's such a great point. So you're a father, you're married, you got three boys. What are some of the lessons that you want them to learn from you as they grow up in this crazy world?
I think about this so much. I mean, one is work hard. I don't care what you do. I try to tell this to my boys all the time. Whatever you decide to do in life, I just want you to be able to commit to it and work as hard as you possibly can at that. And it may not be financially rewarding. One of my kids thinks he wants to grow up and be a high school history teacher right now. And I said, okay, that's great. But I want you to be the best high school history teacher that there is anywhere. And he may change his mind. He may not want to do that when he gets older. But I think number one is work incredibly hard. What I see most, and I'm sure as you get older, these things can change. What I respect the most is fearlessness. Being willing to take risk. And I don't necessarily mean, some people do it in an incredible way, like you did, physically risk, right? Like, oh, I'm going to, get shot at, and I'm going to go try to save lives, like we just saw the Nashville police do. I don't think that I'm particularly a physically brave person, right? Like I don't know. I've never, ever had to use a weapon in a situation of violence. But I respect the fearlessness that involved. But what I am fearless on is mentally, right? I am willing and able to take risks mentally and analyze risk. I think that's ultimately what COVID was, right? It was an intelligence test to see whether you could look at the data and rationally analyze risk and make decisions not only for you, but for your family. So I would hope that they would work incredibly hard at whatever they decide to pursue. I would hope that they would be fearless. It could be either physical or mentally in their life, that they would not allow risk to keep them from pursuing that which they care about the most. And I would hope that they would one day get married and be really good dads and have as many kids as they can. Because that's the one thing I'm happy I've got 3, but I would have kept going 4, 5, 6. I mean, if we could, I've got the resources to be able to take care of them now. But I would hope that they would have a lot of kids and be great dads and raise young kids who can, I'm 44 now. I got, let's say, 40 years left to live-ish. We'll see. I would like to think that I'll be able to be around my grandkids and that they will embody some of those traits to help make America a better place as the generations pass.
Man, these are some crazy big questions, and
yeah,
I mean, it's a great answer. I love Be Fearless. And
Yeah.
so in that vein, what's next for you? What's next for Outkick? What's on the horizon?
I would like to think that Outkick can become a top 5 sports site over the next couple of years. And I think that's important because we're punching back and holding people accountable. And what I would just say is I'm a big marketplace of ideas guy. The bigger Outkick gets, the more people I think in a public eye, for instance, in sports, feel comfortable knowing that there's going to be somebody to defend them. They're not just going to get ripped to shreds if they say, hey, men should compete against men and women should compete against women. And I'll give a credit, Sage Steele and Sam Ponder, two, high profile ESPN anchors who are women, came out today to defend Riley Gaines publicly. I think that's significant, right? I think they're recognizing that there are stakes. For me, I got a book coming out in September. I'm not a 5-year plan guy. I like challenges. I think it's hard to project where in the world the country is going to be. I wouldn't have predicted if we were talking in 2018. I don't think I would have ever seen where we'd be in 2023. So I feel fortunate. When I sold Outkick, my family is taken care of financially. I kid with my wife that at some point I'm just going to grab my phone and throw it as far as I can into the ocean and vanish for a while. She doesn't ever think I'll be willing to do it. But I'm locked in for the next couple of years with Fox, and then we'll see what opportunities kind of are out there and what makes the most sense. Like I said, I like challenges. I'm not sure what the next challenge will be, but I feel fortunate. Look, my grandfather was a coal miner. He had an 8th grade education. I'm named after him. From Muhlenberg County, Kentucky. Came down, worked his entire life at DuPont. He didn't have a lot of options, right? He had to go and punch a clock every day. My great-grandfather from the Sam Travis family died of black lung disease. They don't have, a lot of people don't have options because they're just worried about having a job and taking care of their families every day. These are the people that are the backbone, in my opinion, of America. I feel fortunate to have options, but I also want it to be clear, like, I don't have a tough job. So the idea that I would ever be like, oh, I'm working too hard, I can't do X or I can't do Y, it feels like it would be an insult to the people before me who worked so hard so that I could have an opportunity. Look, I'm sitting in my chair right now. This is my microphone. I sit and talk into a microphone. This is not a physically difficult and demanding job. I'd like to think that I could have an influence and continue to do this long into the future. But I feel an obligation, like I said earlier, if I want my boys to work super hard at something, I feel like they need to see me, their dad, committing and working super hard at something.
Well, I think that's amazing, man. Ladies and gentlemen, Clay Travis. Clay, thank you for coming on. Hey, everybody out there, if you like what you hear, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can subscribe on YouTube, which sucks because they just flagged me and they're demonetizing my channel. So just go to Rumble and subscribe there. Like, we need your help. God bless you all, and God bless this exceptional nation that we live in. Thanks again, Clay.
Thanks, Sean. It was a lot of fun.